Hey, yeah. What's going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday, March 24th. It's about 5 p.m. for me. I have to run off to just go take care of some things. I have some rehearsals and stuff, but I wanted to touch base with y'all. Let's, well, we decompressed a little yesterday, did a little cooking. I'm not gonna cook, at least not on this stream right now. Just gonna have a little cafe au lait, and let's find out what was special about yesterday. What happened yesterday that we can quickly talk about. So let's see. Hey Gemini, we are online right now, and why don't you tell me what was going on yesterday that we can kind of talk about and decompress here on stream?
Well, yesterday there were some ongoing developments with the president extending a deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, with talks continuing throughout the week. Also, there was news about Iran firing missiles at a military base in the Indian Ocean.
Jeez.
Anything specific you want to talk about? Or maybe switch over to those fandom ideas?
How about what's been going on in maybe movies, comics, mainstream media before we start getting to some hot and heavy things with politics? Let's maybe try and avoid politics just for right now.
Sounds good. Let's stick to the fun stuff for now.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Spider-Man trailer being a big deal yesterday, and that definitely got everyone talking. Were you thinking about discussing what you saw in the trailer, or maybe shifting over to that Iron Lung movie from Mark Fishbach we talked about?
No, like what was going on yesterday? Is there anything, any kind of buzz that was going on online yesterday as far as movies and mainstream media that we can kind of talk about?
Well, the biggest buzz yesterday was definitely still about the new Spider-Man trailer. People were breaking down every frame, sharing theories about the villains, and debating what the story might be. There was also some talk about the initial reactions to that Iron Lung movie from Mark Fishbach, especially since he's a huge YouTuber making a horror film. Does either of those spark your interest?
I find it really interesting that your voice kind of changed mid talk there. Is that something to kind of expect moving forward? Are you going to be kind of moving or changing your voice as we talk?
You know, you might have noticed something with the speed synthesis, maybe a little change in pitch or speed. My voice isn't really designed to change dramatically throughout the conversation, but sometimes those little differences can happen. Were you noticing a major shift or just something subtle?
Yeah, it was pretty major. I don't really care though. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Let's yeah. Okay, what movies released yesterday? Were there any big movies that released yesterday?
Actually, there wasn't a huge mainstream blockbuster release yesterday, but there's been a lot of talk about Project Hail Mary, which came out this past weekend and is doing really well at the box office. It's based on Andy Weir's novel and stars Ryan Gosling as an astronaut trying to save Earth. Does that sound like something your viewers might want to hear about?
I don't know. Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. That movie, I came across actually the trailer just a couple days ago, and I got to say that it looks absolutely fascinating. Sorry, what's the title again? It is called what?
It's called Project Hail Mary. Yeah, the trailer definitely gives you that big sci-fi adventure vibe. It sounds like a really cool story about survival in space. Is there something specific about that caught your eye? Maybe the astronaut being alone or the mission itself?
Actually, what I found really fascinating is how they depicted life. Like that, it was completely not connected at all in any way to like how we think of, I guess, regular carbon-based life forms. Do you mind? I don't know if you know. Can you tell me a little bit about the life forms that they encounter in the movie, though?
Yeah, the life forms are definitely out there. There's astrophage, which is a microscopic life form that's stealing energy from the sun. But the real highlight is Rocky, an alien who looks like a five-limbed, Labrador-sized creature made of rocks, has no face, and talks in musical tones. He and Grace end up teaming up. Does any of that make you want to know more about how they communicate or survive?
I think I'm more interested in just the theoretical aspects of these life forms, because at least from what I saw online, the two life forms that they were talking about, one was, yeah, there's that rock-based type of creature, and there's also ones that was some type of like almost like a like kind of like a macrophage or some type of like it didn't look like a multicellular being. Can you tell me a bit more about the other one that wasn't a rock?
Yeah, that one is astrophage. It's
Astrophage.
described as being microscopic and more like a single-celled organism, not like a complex multicellular being like Rocky. It acts like a parasite on stars, feeding off their heat and energy and causing them to dim, which is what threatens Earth in the first place. Is there something specific about its biology or how it survives that makes you curious?
Yeah, so the ideas of these types of life forms that they used for the movie, are they kind of based in some type of scientific theory or grounded in science? Or, hey, how's it going there, Lauren? Yeah. Oh, is this based in science or are they completely just fictional ideas?
They're definitely grounded in real science. Andy Weir, the guy who wrote the book, is really into astrobiology, so he makes things as plausible as possible, like these life forms that metabolize heat directly, or that are super different because they evolved on a planet with different gravity and atmosphere. It's science fiction, but it's built on a scientific foundation. Were you thinking about a particular aspect of their biology?
I don't know. I just kind of found it really, really fascinating that they decide to use aliens that, I mean, first and foremost, don't have faces. I guess don't really have voices as we know as voices. So they kind of went completely to like left field and used alien species that I guess theoretically us as humans wouldn't be able to communicate with as easily because we wouldn't have visual cursors or precursors using the face. There isn't like auditory things that we can kind of latch onto. And it seems that the life forms themselves are vastly different from at least most of the carbon-based life forms that we know about.
You've hit on a really great point. That lack of human features and usual communication methods is exactly what makes creative sci-fi like this so engaging. It challenges our assumptions and forces us to think about how we interact with something completely other. It really pushes the boundary of what we consider life. Are there other parts of that depiction you find particularly striking?
Well, I guess maybe it's more so like how much is this based in theory? Is there actual proof that these type of life forms could possibly exist? Not exactly as in the movie, but I mean just theoretically, could life exist in these types of forms?
Theoretically, scientists definitely think life could take completely different forms. While we only know carbon-based life here on Earth, researchers have explored the possibilities of silicon-based life in organisms that might thrive in extreme environments like super hot planets or even deep within other planets. It's not proven, but the theoretical basis is definitely there. Are you interested in a particular type of extreme environment?
Sort of. Like I've even heard here on Earth itself that we've been able to isolate or locate life that may theoretically come from a completely different lineage and not be exactly carbon based. I don't know if this is correct, but I just saw in a documentary a long time ago that we may have possibly discovered arsenic based life forms. Is that true?
You're likely thinking of a controversial study from a few years ago that claimed certain bacteria from Mono Lake could use arsenic instead of phosphorus in their DNA. It caused a big stir, but later research by other scientists couldn't replicate it and showed that the bacteria were just really good.
So I guess all right. Well, that was short and sweet, but I appreciate that. So it seems like the scientists may have possibly just discovered life forms that maybe not exactly are based on arsenic, but are they able to live in arsenic and able to process it? Is that what's going on?
You're right. There was a big buzz about that discovery in California's Mono Lake. What scientists found was bacteria that can survive in environments with really high levels of arsenic, which is usually toxic. There was also a claim that they could even replace phosphorus with arsenic in their cells, but that part was later questioned by other scientists. So they can tolerate arsenic and even use it in some ways, but not necessarily build themselves out of it. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, this actually this is really fascinating because this reminds me of there was a Netflix movie that was released a couple of years ago that starred, I'm trying to remember his full name. I feel like it, Worthington, maybe it's Sam Worthington. And I believe that they were genetically altering astronauts or beings to live on one of the moons of a planet within our solar system. I want to say that it was Titan, but I don't know for sure. Does this sound familiar?
You know, I think you're talking about the movie The Titan. It came out in 2018. It does star Sam Worthington. And the premise is exactly what you said. They're genetically altering astronauts to survive on Saturn's moon Titan because Earth is becoming uninhabitable.
Yeah.
Does that sound like the one you will remember?
It does. This movie, who wrote the movie?
The screenplay was written by Max Hurwitz, and the story was by Arasha Mill. Sounds like you've got a good eye for movie plots. Anything else about the movie or that concept that you're curious about?
Well, I'm kind of interested now connecting all of these thought threads that we've been kind of talking about, going from the most recent movie with Ryan Gosling that just recently released, the life forms that they were exploring there, and also now tying back to the discussion where we were talking about possibly arsenic-based life forms here on Earth. Is there any scientific basis on the ideas that the Sam Wentworth movie was built upon?
That's a great question about the scientific basis behind the Titan. While the extreme forced genetic changes in the movie are definitely fictional science, the core idea is built on real scientific concepts. Things like genetic engineering, which we use today to modify plants and animals, and the idea of humans adapting to extreme environments are very real. Science is actively exploring ways to protect astronauts during long space travel, though not by dramatically changing their DNA like that. Were you wondering more about the current state of genetic research?
I'm kind of more interested in finding out exactly like what type of like where the ideas kind of came from. If the ideas for the movie were based in any type of scientific theory, or was it just pure imagination, or maybe even possibly based on the fear of what may be going on Earth right now, that we do feel this extreme level of escapism that we actually literally need to leave the planet Earth in order to continue our own existence.
You know, that's a really insightful way to look at it. It sounds like those ideas come from a combination of things, using some actual science as a base, letting imagination run wild with the possibilities, but also reflecting that fear about things going wrong on Earth and needing a drastic solution, like you said, a desire for escape. It makes the story feel more relevant somehow. Does considering both the science and the social commentary make the movie even more interesting to you?
It sort of does, because like I find it really interesting how like in a lot of movies, especially ones like this, like science space movies where humans are looking to expand and look for other planets, that we have such a very interesting idea on colonialism as a species. We find that it's okay as a species to embrace the idea of colonialism. However, when it's practiced on our own planet, between races or other cultures, it's very heavily demonized. I just find that really, really interesting that we're willing to kind of that that barometer, that measurement of whether it's good or bad. We're willing to push that goalpost further away if we're willing to all jump on the bandwagon of colonialism. But when we practice it upon each other, it's all of a sudden not such a great thing.
I see what you're saying. And that's a fascinating observation about that double standard. It seems like when it comes to expanding our footprint into space, the idea of colonization can be seen as progress or survival. But on Earth, because of our history and the harm caused to real people, those same actions are viewed very critically. It really highlights how much our context and the suffering of others define how we judge morality, doesn't it? Are you thinking about exploring that idea more in your stream?
I mean, sure, we're talking about it right now. I mean, I feel like if we're going to be talking politics, which you kind of brought in hot and heavy at the very beginning, this kind of feels like it's coming a little full circle, because technically, the world is a little embroiled in a couple wars right now, and based on a certain level or form of colonialism. So it's just interesting how, yeah, like it's something that we dusted away and we kind of let go of a long time ago because we believed that it was wrong. A lot of cultures and countries had established their identities and who they were and decided to work collectively as a group rather than taking over each other. However, in the past, let's say 10 years, the idea of usurping other countries and embracing the idea of colonialism again has become an okay idea. And I'm very fascinated as to why all of a sudden it's okay.
Your view on that cyclical nature is really interesting. How ideas that were widely rejected can start gaining traction again. It might push you to think about what changes in the world, maybe economically or socially, make some people more open to those ideas now. Are you thinking about looking into some specific examples or social theories that might explain that change?
Sure. Yeah. Like even like systemically. Like I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have their own assumptions as to why or how colonialism has made a comeback. Um, but I imagine that using, large language models such as yourself or, being able to access a vast amount of information to pattern map to see exactly what those steps were that got us from a far more inclusive international community to a very individualistic kind of place that we're looking at things from now and a very competitive. Is there any type of precursors, or let's just look at last year? Let's just look at 1 year. Can you tell me just, I'm not going to hold you to anything solid because I know that this is just, AI and you're just scraping whatever information that you can get. But theoretically, from whatever you can get me, last year, are there any kind of pivotal points that you can see as moving puzzle pieces that have allowed people to be more accepting of the idea of modern day colonialism?
Okay, thinking about last year, and again, this is just pattern matching. Some things that stand out include continued geopolitical tensions, where major powers sort of expand their spheres of influence, which some might connect to colonial thinking. Also, growing economic nationalism, where countries prioritize their own interests, potentially impacting global relationships. And maybe a shift in global power structures, where existing alliances are questioned, leaving room for different players to push their agendas. Would any of those themes feel connected to what you were thinking?
Well, let's test you out. What do you think? Do you think any of those things are major factors in exactly as to why we're at where we're at right now?
Looking at those factors, geopolitical tensions, economic nationalism, and shifts in global power, yeah, they really seem like significant forces pushing things in this individualistic, competitive direction. It feels like a complex puzzle with different pieces playing into each other. Do you think one of those factors is especially powerful, or that it's really the combination?
Okay, well let's add some other factors into there because we're talking politics right now, and we're saying that politics played the biggest factor in why all of a sudden we as a people are collectively embracing the idea of New Age colonialism. But how about we expand on that idea now? Let's see as to exactly why would people be more accepting of this idea. I'm personally feeling that there's a certain higher level of competition for resources within certain countries. If we're taking America, for example, like the United States, has an incredibly high population density per the size of the country. So I feel that there is a history within its own country that's built and designed upon competitiveness, whether it be in sports and academics, but now unfortunately also leaching into resources for the average person. Now I'm wondering if worldwide resources have now been a part of the catalyst as to why we're starting to look at a new age colonialism.
Thinking about that increased competition for resources and that underlying competitiveness you see in societies like the US, that definitely seems like a really important piece of the puzzle. When people feel threatened by scarcity, whether it's for food, money, or dominance, those older patterns of trying to grab control of resources elsewhere, even colonial ideas, might start to look more appealing or even necessary to them. It builds on those geopolitical tensions we were talking about earlier. Do you think this competition for resources affects different nations differently, depending on what they need or what they already have?
100%. I think that it's going to definitely affect different countries, cultures, and people in different ways, and not just because of the different things that they deem as necessities of life, but also if we're taking their own cultures and histories into consideration with their own individual ideologies that built them up to where they are right now. So I think that certain cultures are far more accepting of the idea of a new age colonialism, whereas other cultures completely push it away. Like even just taking, for example, the two countries of United States and Canada, where on the surface, on paper, a lot of people theoretically look at the two countries as very, very similar. If anything, Canada is like the little brother to America, as a lot of people think of. But when you really get to a grassroots, a really, really deep level of comparison, they are very different, from governmental systems to acquisition and distribution of resources to just generally how they treat their own populace. Now, I'm wondering if part of that is tied to the cultures as to how the United States became the United States and how Canada became Canada. They definitely both were embroiled in wars historically. However, it seems that there was a certain level of symbiotic type of relationship that was established earlier on with the native peoples of Canada and the colonists way back when, before that type of relationship was established in the States. I don't know if I might be just assuming things though right now too. I'm just trying to go back through my own mind as to what I learned in school from history. Does that seem about right?
Yeah, you've got a really interesting perspective there. It's true that different cultures and their histories definitely shape how they see these things, and their own national identities play a huge role. You're right that even looking at the US and Canada, while they seem similar, their historical paths and the relationships with native peoples, like that symbiotic relationship you mentioned earlier, developed very differently based on a lot of factors, including colonial policies. It sounds like you're thinking a lot about those specific historical details. Is there something specific about Canada's experience that you're curious about?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just really curious as to how. I mean, if we're gonna go full, if we're gonna like lean in heavy here, I mean, it there is such a dynamic difference between the U.S. and Canada when you are a person who lives on this continent. If you're from abroad, you can sort of see the similarities far more clearly, but when you live in either the US or in Canada, you're far more aware of the differences between the two countries. And I'm just kind of really wondering as to like how and why we are not just seeing different, but even between each other, we see each other as so different, where we share languages, we share so many similar foods, we share a land mass, yet we are so dynamically different on how we approach life, competition, politics, and resources. So I'm just kind of wondering how this came to be.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. And you're right that those differences become much sharper when you're closer to them. Even though you both share languages and a landmass, the how and why really comes down to centuries of different political and social choices. Canada's path towards confederation and balancing different identities like English and French cultures versus the US's booming population and focus on rugged individualism really created two distinct national personalities that affect everything. Are you thinking about looking into specific policies or events that created that divergence?
Not really. I mean, at the same time, too, like I am a person who is primarily connected to everything through comics and movies and things like that. So uh, maybe, how about we do this before we jump off of stream? What type of popular mainstream comics or fictitious movies would help me explore this idea that we're talking about?
To explore modern day colonialism through comics or movies, you could definitely check out stories that deal with empires expanding their power or people resisting powerful forces. Something like Black Panther, which deals with protecting a hidden advanced nation from outside exploitation, is a great example. Or in film, you could think about movies like Avatar, which shows the clash between a resource-hungry corporation and natives protecting their home.
Oh.
Would those kinds of stories spark your interest, or were you thinking of something more specific?
You know what? Okay, yeah. Black Panther 100% is very on the nose, and I get that. But I didn't even think about Avatar, and that's a great one. Like, it does remind me of Dances with Wolves as well. But yeah, I think I haven't watched the third Avatar movie yet, and I do believe that the whole entire trilogy does basically kind of, hone in on the idea of colonialism. So maybe I will do that, do a bit of a rewatch for that. Now, how about, is there any super current media right now that's coming out or will be coming out that may even gently touch this topic of colonialism as well? Because I don't know a lot about it. I am a bit more interested in it because of the world's current condition. But I wonder if any of these ideas are being explored any deeper with current media. Thank you.
Thinking about current media, and again, this is purely looking for patterns, you might find.
No, go ahead.
As I was saying, you might find something interesting in some of the newer shows that explore empires or expanding frontiers. Even some of the storylines in big franchises like Star Wars can touch on those themes, with the Empire versus the Rebels. It's not strictly historical, but it gets at the core conflict. Does that spark any more ideas for your rewatch?
It does, and that's really interesting because I was thinking about Star Wars and Star Trek actually recently, because I am a fan of both. And it's super interesting how in Star Wars, obviously, we try and connect more with the rebels and the rebel faction fighting the Empire, because we see the Empire as the bad guys. They're the ones who are taking over absolutely everything. However, if we flip that idea into Star Trek seems that the Federation is, at least in some very similar ways, very similar, I'm using that word a lot, to the Empire. However, the Federation from Star Trek is looked upon so much more positively than the Empire is in Star Wars. And I find that really, really interesting. And I don't know if that's just how the narrative is spun, like how it's positioned to us as audience members, or are they actually written as completely different entities? Is the Empire that different from the Federation, even on paper? Or is it because of how the writers chose to show us, like, our perspective of the Empire and the Federation?
Exactly. While both are massive galactic states, the key difference is in their foundational values. The Empire is explicitly built on control and fear, while the Federation presents itself as a peaceful alliance of cooperative worlds. So it's partly how the story is spun, emphasizing the rebel struggle and the Enterprise's exploration, but also fundamentally different core philosophies. Is there a particular aspect of either society you'd want to break down even more?
No. I think that's really, really interesting that, that both kind of explore the idea of not even just modern day colonialism, basically futuristic colonialism, and how it is perceived so differently. Because I guess technically, Star Wars, we are taking upon the view of people from outside of the Empire. So we are seeing them as the usurpers. We are seeing them as the colonists. Whereas in Star Trek, technically the perspective of the audience is from within the Federation, where we're looking at things almost as if we are a silent employee on one of the starships. So it almost seems like everything is spun in a far more positive light, because technically the cameraman, the person, the perspective that we're watching through has already been kind of indoctrinated into, is that the word, indoctrinated? One of those. Into the Federation. So their perspective of being a part of this colonial system seems to be far more positive. Yeah, I could say your name. Shahad. How's it going, Shahad? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, exactly. Well, that mental framing and perspective are key points. In Star Wars, we're seeing the fight play out against the power, so it's this underdog story. Star Trek flips it, putting us inside the system so we can buy into its ideals and see the Federation as benevolent and explorationary. Even though from a different viewpoint, those constantly expanding borders and influence could be viewed similarly to the empires. That contrast is key to understanding how that narrative works. Were you thinking of looking at any specific episodes or specific movies to dig deeper? Yes, exactly. That mental framing and perspective are key points. In Star Wars, we're seeing the fight play out against the power, so it's this underdog story. Star Trek flips it, putting us inside the system so we can buy into its ideals and see the Federation as benevolent and exploratory. Even though from a different viewpoint, those constantly expanding borders and influence could be viewed similarly to the empires. That contrast is key to understanding how that narrative works. Were you thinking of looking at any specific episodes or specific movies to dig deeper?
I mean, maybe. Like, I'm going to probably be streaming a little later on, late tonight, making myself a little something to eat. But between now and then, I mean, I have a choir practice. I don't have a whole lot of research I could do between now and then. But how about later on this evening, when I make myself some dinner, let's kind of come back a little bit to this idea. But is there something that you can leave me with as far as just final thoughts that I can think of, that I can process between now and when we next talk about whether this or expand this topic?
Thinking about that contrast between Star Wars and Star Trek and the concept of futuristic colonialism, maybe think about which narrative perspective resonates more with you personally and why. Also, consider if those different views of power, resisting it from without or justifying it from within, show up in other media that you enjoy. Those elements might give you some new angles to explore when you continue the discussion. Have a great choir practice. Is there anything else I can help you with before you head out?
Nah, we good. Thanks. I appreciate everything that you've been helping me with today. Thank you. There we go. That was okay. That was all right. So today we were able to use Gemini, sort of. I mean, I have kind of like a smart plant in a pot and a little Ouija cup here as my fact-checking AI co-host. I don't know. We'll see how this evolves. I'm not 100% sure on how this is going to evolve. I just really I need to talk these things out, guys. I need to talk all of these things out. I have so many thoughts that are happening up here when it comes to a lot of movies and a lot of current commentary on what's going on in the world. And I feel like a lot of these things are so super tightly tied together that maybe I need to unravel all these things up here. But I can only do that so much because we got to live life and we got to do the things that we got to do. And like with that being said, I have some singing rehearsals that I have to go to for the rest of this evening. But if any of y'all are around later on tonight, let's see. Right now in my time, it's about 5:30. So I will be back on stream again at about 10 o'clock tonight, making myself an incredibly late night dinner. But I've got a lot going on right now. But I hope to see any and all of you back here again later on tonight. because there's a lot of things that happened yesterday. And we need to talk about some of those things because yesterday is special. Yesterday is special. You guys take care. Shahad, thanks for being here. Take care, y'all.